Hey guys, Bader Badruddin here from AnimDojo and welcome to our fourth podcast. With me here is Tom Box, co-founder of Blue Zoo and AnimDojo.
Hello.
And Negar Bagheri, who is head of LookDev at
Hello.
Blue Zoo.
Hi.
So in previous podcasts, we've discussed festival etiquette, we've done showreel do's and don'ts, and in the last one, we interviewed animation director Ben Steer on career anxiety, focus and direction. And in this one, we wanted to continue on the trend of job applications. So in this podcast, we're focusing on what happens after you finish your showreel and you upload it, that next step, which is applying for jobs. So to do that, we spoke to Jill Wallace from Axis and Sarah Tanner from Jellyfish Pictures.
So my name is Jill Wallace. I am the head of HR at Axis Studios. I'm currently based up in Glasgow, but Axis Studios has 3 studios across the UK, one in Glasgow, one in Bristol and one in London. As a head of HR, a huge part of my role is responsibility and overseeing all the recruitment for our studios.
My name's Sarah Tanner. I'm the HR director at Jellyfish Pictures. We're based in London. So we have 4 studios. We've got a studio in central London near Soho, just off Margaret Street. We've got one in Brixton and we have 2 other studios in Oval. Our Brixton and Oval studios are based around producing animation, largely from our studio in Margaret Street. We do much of the sort of VFX film, TV productions from there.
So we asked them a bunch of questions, and the first one is how best to apply to animation studios. So this is what Jill and Sarah had to say.
Due to the range of projects that we have in the studio, across our 3 studios, we have to adopt a range of processes to find key talent. So one of the most direct ways to get in touch with Axis is to send your CV and showreel in via our direct application on the website. This is, I guess, is the most convenient route that you can take. You can fill in a job specific application, or as I've said, a general speculative application. Speculative applications are very welcome. These are reviewed and catalogued for future opportunities. Similarly, you can just send us an email with your showreel and letter direct to the recruitment inbox. Again, these are catalogued and reviewed in database. I would suggest getting onto Vimeo and YouTube and posting your showreel and portfolio links up there. Similarly, you can use places like ArtStation. There's great online resources available nowadays for talent to post their artwork, and these are sites that Axis frequently reviews and accesses in order to find the best talent.
So the best way to contact us at Jellyfish is via our website. Equally, we'll be advertising on LinkedIn or through a number of websites. So always the best way to contact us is in response to an advert or via our website, where there will be a careers page, and you go onto the careers page and there'll be links to specific vacancies and roles that we're recruiting for. Often Jellyfish will also have a place to apply speculatively. So if you can't see a role that's right for you, then there's a way for you to send through your CV and showreel as well. So the best way to do it is online, because we get a large number of applications. So what we'll be able to do is to be able to capture all of the information in one place. It also means that we can contact you if you apply for a role and are unsuccessful. It means we can hold your information and contact you for something in the future that might appeal to you and suit your skills and experience.
So that's quite similar advice from them both studios. Sounds like websites is the route to go.
I think for sort of ease of access, and especially because we've got so many projects kind of happening at the same time and different managers looking for people and different criterias, the online applying applications is very good. And I know on our site, if you do make a profile, you can always revisit and keep updating that. So, you know, that's kind of the root of it. And then I think there was ArtStation was mentioned, and especially for those people that want to get involved in kind of design work and visual development, it's really important to build an online presence. And you know, even ArtStation is nice, and it's good to put, I've said before to students, to keep sort of more polished work on there, because it is essentially, it's your showcasing your portfolio. But it's also good to have like a little link in there going to their Instagram page, because that's kind of your work in progress. And for especially things like character design, we love to see roughs. Sometimes they inform us better of the kind of style and the kind of person we're looking for a design job. So really good to keep on top of that. And the third thing's more of a face-to-face, and I think you can do a lot of that via LinkedIn, the kind of networking, and via Instagram, things like that. But it's really important to touch base with people in the industry, and if you're a student with the guys you went to uni with, or did a short course with, or it's just really good to hold on to those links, because sometimes we still rely on word of mouth, because if we've got a short project, let's say, we want to have the confidence, and we will take someone that we know and their recommendation over having to scout through hundreds of reels. So all those three methods are really important to sort of keep on top of, I think.
And I guess it's about finding, making it easy for the recruiter to find you, which all of those point towards.
Yeah.
I think I have one sort of comment that I'd like to add, and it's more from the studio that's recruiting's point of view. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine that I used to have, where after you've applied and then they ask you to fill in again your work experience, and it's like, well, that's my CV. Like I can understand wanting to build a database, but I think there should be a balance between that. I mean, this is my own experience, like a balance between gathering work examples and the people's names and contact details versus having to recreate their entire application process online again.
Yeah.
I understand that there are reasons for that, but
it's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess when it's a really big studio and it's hard to keep on top of, and there's so many teams managing the recruitment side, that you do get lost in the woodworks. That's exactly it. It's making sure that you are sort of either reapplying when it's necessary to, or I know what you mean. It can be tedious.
We could rename this podcast into the Beta's Pet Peeve podcast every week. So I think, and also an important thing that I think Jill touched on is about speculative applications. And I think something we talk about later in this podcast is, just because there's a job that's advertised doesn't mean you should apply for it, when you can apply for a speculative. Because if you're not fit for it, you're not going to really get into an interview. So
definitely.
Go for a speculative if
it might also like paint you in a very I wouldn't say negative way, but it would at least kind of make them question, why did you apply for example, a supervisor role when you're clearly still a junior? So it just kind of
it's good to have ambition, but a sensible amount of ambition, I guess. Cool. So the next question we asked is regarding CVs and cover notes, and really what their purpose is. As everyone says, it's all about showreel. So why even bother with a CV and cover note?
I'm going to be brutally honest. Sometimes I never get around to reading them.
Okay, well, let's hear what Jill and Sarah had to say.
So I think it's super important to include a CV alongside your application. A cover note, I would say it's useful to have a cover note because it gives a bit more context as to why you're applying to a studio. I guess in some ways it also gives a studio a bit more encouragement as to the fact that you may have tailored that application and CV and cover letter to that particular studio, and it shows that you've gone maybe beyond what some other applicants have done. So it can make your application go further, sometimes considering the extra effort, I guess, is a way to look at it, that you've gone to include a cover letter. And it also just gives a bit more context to your CV, because ultimately you don't want to make a CV 5-6 pages long. So a couple of pages for a CV and I join that alongside a cover letter is I guess in some ways the ideal application route, plus a kick-ass portfolio. In terms of the content in your CV, considering it's a creative environment and an industry that we all work in, I think it is good to be creative with your CV. After all, the recruitment team are looking at CVs and portfolios many times in a day, and looking at many CVs over the course of a week. So being creative, i.e. making it stand out and making it a little bit unique, maybe a bit quirky, is always going to get you noticed. But I think it's important that being creative with your CV doesn't overshadow the content in it, and the legibility and the attention to detail within it, because all of those things will go against you if you submit an application with a badly spelt CV or some kind of obvious errors.
So for me personally, the CV and cover note are still really important when applying for a role. So obviously in the creative industries, it's really important to have a really strong show reel that really visually encapsulates your talent and your skills. However much experience you've had, the show reel does provide a really good example of the work you are capable of right now, and it gives a really good indication of your potential as well for your sort of creative thought and vision that's gone into that. The CV and the covering letter doesn't have to be massive, but it should be short and succinct. But for me personally, I know that if I know that in your covering letter you've written specifically to me at Jellyfish, I understand, and you'll stand out more to me because I know that you've applied to me personally and you've taken the time to consider why you want to work for Jellyfish. I appreciate everyone will be applying for lots of different jobs, so it's really important in a whole pile of covering letters and show reels, if there's one that stands out that's particularly written to me at Jellyfish, that will stand out more to me because I will feel that you actually want to work for me personally rather than the other 50 people that you've applied for.
So it's all about making it personable and giving your show reel context. Negar, what are you going to chip in with?
No, to be honest, I'll take it back a bit because sometimes we're pushed for recruitment and we need to process a lot of applications. So no, I don't have a chance to read through the whole thing, and some people do really put a lot of effort into writing it, and I know that's not right, but it's just not the physical time. But to be honest, I do take sort of note of that, and you do skim through it. So actually it does inform you of at least their attitude towards work, and however little it is, you still kind of you gauge kind of what someone's goals are and their mentality and whether it will be the right fit for the studio, even if it's not that personalized. You get that, you checked out our work and why you want to work here, and it's like a sort of preamble to kind of coming in for the interview and the interview process. The CV, I completely agree that of course you need to kind of maintain a balance, because you can make it look more creative and interesting, and they do pop out, but we have had CVs where it's really difficult to read what's on there, so the being legible is key.
Yeah. I think in terms of reading CVs, I totally agree. I mean, when we were also recruiting, because it's the size of the studio, I guess. You know, like some studios would have like a whole dedicated HR department, so they would obviously like be able to sift through CVs, and whereas if the animation director themselves or the leads are going through show reels, they probably don't have time to dig through. Unless they wanted to then interview someone, and then they would kind of maybe go through it just really quickly. I
mean, every animation studio is different, but I thought it's more common than not for people to look at a show reel as their first port of call. Then if that passes the quality test, they'll then look at the CV, which means that a lot of CVs will never be seen because the person watching the show reel probably won't think it's right for the project, so therefore won't then look at the CV.
And a note on cover letters or cover notes. I don't know, I mean, this is me personally. I found that a short, quick, simple, cover note is just a lot more likely to be company read as
makes
opposed
it friendly.
And it shouldn't come across as dear sir hiring manager blah blah blah. Like keep it hey, my name is blah 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 and I've done this and I've done that, and I'm really keen to get onto the studio. I just wanted to share my work with you. Hope to hear back. Something, just as clear and simple as that.
And always start with a compliment to the studio.
Yes. Also,
the right studio.
Get the name right.
But that's another thing. If you're going to be copying and pasting, make sure you do not forget to change the studio name.
Yeah.
Because that can really backfire.
A ridiculously common mistake.
Yeah.
After that, we went on to websites and really to find out if they have a purpose, if having a show on just Vimeo or whatever platform is enough. So this is what Jill and Sarah from Axis and Jellyfish thought of that.
I don't think you necessarily need a website nowadays. As I said, you can use LinkedIn, get your resume up there. You can link your Vimeo or your ArtStation link to your LinkedIn profile. I think within the profile page in Vimeo, you could include a short breakdown. You could include some contact details, some CV information. So I think nowadays, considering the other bespoke industry resources that exist online, I don't think you necessarily need to go and create a specific website as such. For us, we'd rather see the effort to some extent going into that portfolio and showreel rather than having a super flash website that, I guess, if you want to focus your attention on one thing in particular that's going to get you work, then it's what the content of that showreel and portfolio is, rather than a bells and whistles website that's taking you 4 months to create.
With regards to a website, I would say the most important thing really is a showreel. If there is a website, then and you've got enough content, then fantastic. If you're only starting out into the industry, it's pretty basic. It's probably not necessary. You probably want to, as I said before, focus just on your showreel really. That said, the more experienced you become, and if you've got a sort of a breadth of work, a website can be great as well because it shows breadth of experience and skills. So it's not a bad thing. I just wouldn't spread yourself too thin that you're trying to do all your efforts on a showreel and a website and a CV. I would focus very heavily on your creative stuff and having an outstanding showreel as best you possibly can with a nice, strong, succinct CV. And if you have the time and the ability and capability to have a strong website, fantastic. But as I say, having all three is awesome. But the focus probably, as I say, to starting out would be really your showreel and your CV and covering letter.
That quite surprised me that they weren't very overly keen on websites in terms of their importance, where I thought they play a slightly more important role. But both Jill and Sarah said they weren't that essential. I
mean, I only have one thought on it because I remember a long time ago, I've been experimenting with making my own website for ages. There was always a new website every year, pretty much. From 2006 up until 2012.
I'm going to look for these websites.
they're all gone now. They're all...
Nothing's ever gone on the internet.
It's still the black hole of the internet. But one thing I learned was that over the years and kind of learning about what's the best way to present your work, surprisingly, as visual artists, we tend to have the worst websites. It's always badly designed. There's always... we're not web designers, unless that's what you're doing.
Yeah, which is the danger of building websites.
Exactly.
It can put people off.
Yeah, there are these websites that exist where you can, go through templates. But again, you're still having to make these decisions and you're putting things up and you don't know whether or not it's compatible with the browsers and the player that you're using. That for me is the biggest issue. It's not so much about whether you have one or not. You can have a website, but you're better off still having something that's a bit more standard.
Yeah.
Like an ArtStation or a Vimeo page, just something to keep it simple.
I think one thing I think Jill also said, I don't think it was in that clip, was that the risk it carries is the more you show, the more there is to critique. And if you put all of the stuff you've ever made, some of that's not going to be great. It might be from 5 years ago or whatever, when you weren't as good as you are now. So there's a tendency to, if you build a website, you think, I''ve got to fill this with content, and that can be detrimental because you're not kind of refining and refining?
Refining
so you're not refining and curating what you're putting out there as much.
I personally would disagree with that, only on one point, is that whenever I get an application and I see someone's Vimeo and I like their work, I go through and I keep seeing backwards and backwards. I might even go back all the way to their uni work. And I like seeing the progression. because at least it shows me, oh, so like over the past 5 years, they've actually made some big strides.
But then you've got to be clear that that's like date your work.
Well, that's
Otherwise,
the thing,
you don't
yeah.
know.
Like, that's the benefit of it being, for example, on a Vimeo page, because it's
Yeah.
dated. Whereas if it's on a website and it's just put all together,
And it's,
I can't tell.
And it's a drawing you did 10 years ago.
Exactly.
And it
There's
looks,
no way I
you
can
know.
tell.
I think, they're right in saying that you should find areas of focusing in on your work and how you share that. So if, depending on the job you're applying for, especially with animation, lighting, comp, modelling, all those jobs, texturing, shading, yes, a show reel is important. That's what we need to see. That's key. And it doesn't matter sort of what platform you put that on, as long as it's accessible, then that's fine. But I think websites are useful if you are a designer, and it helps sort of develop your brand and your style. And I think that when we look for people like that, it's not the case of, if we're looking for an animator or a lighter or a comper, whatever it is, we're looking at the skill set in that work. We need to be able to know that they're gonna come into the studio and either get trained up or can pick up the work that we're doing. It's collaborative, everyone's kind of doing the same type of work. But if we want to get a designer in for something specific, usually we want them to bring some of their personality and their thoughts and their design process. So in those cases, to be honest, sometimes, a lot of the time, we scout for this kind of stuff. So we know of an artist, or we pick them up on Pinterest or Instagram or ArtStation or whatever, or word of mouth, and we would go and explore their website. And I think that's really key, if you're a designer, be on those platforms, but also try and build a website. And there are templates you can use. In the end, you're displaying images, but to be honest, if you're starting out doing it, the best thing to do is, you're probably following designers, go on their websites, check how they've presented their work, because if you're going to build that, it needs to be coherent. You need to split your work out, like Beta's saying, that if you want to look for more of their work, you should be able to find it really easily, and you just need to make sure it's accessible.
And I think, just to touch on that, I would say that the simpler the platform that it's on, the better. Like, whether you're going for making your own website, even if it's a simple thing, it's just scrolling, like, like just it's like a blog type, where it's just going all the way down, and then like you can link to different, as opposed to it being like a Flash type.
Yeah, just a simple
definitely.
Squarespace or Wix template.
Yeah.
Just nice, cleaner, minimal.
Yeah.
There's less to go wrong.
Exactly.
But I mean, we're saying explore more work, but still don't put any old thing on there. It
And
still needs to be refined down.
I think everything we've been talking about is about putting yourself kind of out there on different websites, like from the ArtStation to Instagram. And the best thing a website can do is be that hub that brings all those links together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're spread out, a recruiter might not know you've got an Instagram.
As long as they're relevant.
Yeah.
Cool. So in terms of CVs, we really wanted to kind of look further into the do's and don'ts and the purpose of CVs. So really how to make it as purposeful as possible, and to hit the ground running when a recruiter sees it. This is what Jill and Sarah thought on that subject.
I think the purpose of a CV is to understand a bit more about the types of projects that they've worked on, perhaps the types of responsibilities that they may have had towards a particular project. It's also, I think, important to include in a CV any industry accolades that you may have been awarded, any additional industry training that you've taken part in or indeed given, because I think all these additional things that you can't necessarily see from a showreel are a good indication of the type of applicant that you're looking at, who has gone kind of maybe beyond, over and above what other applicants have done themselves. So having these extra pieces of information in the CV, I think, is really useful, because it's information that you can't necessarily get elsewhere. It's good for a studio like us to get a sense of the different variety of projects that an applicant might have worked on. But it's important to say that obviously our industry is well versed in non-disclosure agreements. So always be very, very mindful of including project or IP or title information on a CV, in a show reel on a LinkedIn profile, because as an industry we understand that sometimes you're not able to disclose that information, and it is very much frowned upon to have that information included somewhere where it shouldn't be, and as a studio we understand that you can't always publicise your involvement in certain IPs and projects, and that's okay.
The main thing's really to keep into a CV, to keep it succinct. Very, very clear personal details right at the top, so all your contact details are really easy to find. Make sure you've got a really sensible, good email address as well, not some funny email address that's named after your pet. And I'd also do just a very quick summary about some of your key skills, perhaps some of your passions, right at the top, so to really hook someone in. And then right from the top, as I say, just summarise your key experience and your key skills, and the bits that are the most important, and the strongest attributes about yourself as you go down the page. Don't try and drag it out over a couple of pages if all you've got is one page. Just make it a really, really solid one page, and make that CV stand out so that the person reading it wants to meet you and learn more. The point of a CV is a summary of your experience. It's not trying to give every single piece of experience and skill to that person reading it. It's to hook them in, to make them want to see more.
I think one way of summing up what they said is a reel is an advert for your skills and a CV is an advert for you, and it's all those kind of extracurricular stuff that isn't shown on your reel. Yeah,
I think sometimes, obviously, if you're a student, you might not necessarily have, or you won't have the work experience. And I think you can put something in there about, I know that sort of group projects are promoted and they're great for university projects. And if you've done that in experience, you can highlight, be humble about it, but highlight where you've gone above and beyond, because that really informs us of how passionate you are. And that's okay to put in. It doesn't necessarily have to be a work placement thing.
And that's generally how you get up the ranks in studios, by showing your enthusiasm, by going beyond the call of duty, and doing that extra step.
I totally agree. And one thing I would say as well, just to add to that, is like, if you don't have experience and you've done uni work and you put in all that, if you've done stuff that's outside of the industry, even if it's like you've worked, you've volunteer work or retail or whatever jobs you did, I think it just enforces, obviously depends on your experience. Like if you're changing careers, you will have experience, but it puts things into perspective, I think, for the employer to see what kind of person you are as well. How serious you are, what's your work ethic like,
and what you've done outside of education in terms of if you've learned software on your own.
Exactly.
To us, that shows how passionate you are, rather than done purely what's been asked of you at university or college. Yeah,
definitely. I think I was going to mention this earlier, but have obviously noting down your experience in your CV, but to be honest, just for quick access, I do normally just quickly open up their LinkedIn profile and go through that. So it's good also to update that and make sure they are both updated when you send it over. Yeah.
But I think the main thing is just make it relevant, clear and simple. You don't need to pad it out with a job at McDonald's you had when you were 16.
Exactly.
It's not relevant.
Just one more thing to add. People always say to always embellish and to kind of, I think there's a limit to that where it starts to then become just lying. Like, you don't want to say stuff that's not who you are, what you've done, because if you were then chosen to come in and do the job, if it's not caught during the interview process, it's going to just backfire. So you be honest. There's, even if a job description says it requires experience, sometimes people overlook that and just go with their, if they feel you have the skills and the talent and the passion, they will give you a chance.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sell yourself, but don't oversell where you clearly shouldn't be, because it's more, our industry is a people industry, really. We want to know if we can get on with you, and part of that comes through in the CV. And you're right. I think
keep it
simple, be humble about it, and definitely.
Cool. Next up, we have in terms of reapplying for studios. So let's hear what they had to say on that.
I'd say if you were applying to leave it if you hadn't had a positive response, then you don't necessarily want to reapply 1 month later, because what's changed in that 1 month, unless you've gone away and suddenly changed your portfolio or showreel, then to reapply a month later would not be advised. I guess if you want to reapply, then the reason for doing so should be because the studio itself has changed the content of the role that you had previously applied for. Maybe the requirements have changed, maybe it's a different style of animation, or indeed you've actually gone and polished your showreel and got some new shots in there, and you want to reapply because you feel there's a genuine reason that you're now more suitable for the role than perhaps you were when you first applied. Generally, I think 2-3 applications a year would be enough. Ultimately, if you've got a good portfolio, we won't forget about you. We'll make sure that you're catalogued and that you are listed in the database in an appropriate place with an appropriate piece of context added as to what projects you'd be suitable for, and you know, we will find the soonest opportunity to work with you. So reapplying, yeah, 2 or 3 times per year max, but make sure that the key point for that reapplication is because there's something changed from that first point of application. You've either got some new content in your showreel, or the job requirements have obviously changed from the original advert.
So when we're recruiting for a number of roles throughout the year. There's kind of no peaks and troughs, really. It really depends on the projects coming in and the type of work. But somebody may apply for a position and the demand at that time could be really, really high, competition incredibly high, and it might mean that you're unsuccessful. We'd always encourage people to reapply for positions. Competition is hard, and actually it might be that you might not have been successful on one occasion, and then the next time you are. All the while you're still learning, you're still developing, gaining new skills. So absolutely always consider reapplying for a role, even if it's the same role. I probably wouldn't apply within, say, a week or 2, because it could be that actually your skills aren't the right fit for that job at that point in time. However, it might be worth asking sometimes for feedback if you've applied a couple of times for a position and haven't been successful and been offered an interview, just to understand a little bit more whether it's a skills gap at the moment, or if it's due to high competition and a fewer number of roles available. But absolutely, I think perseverance is key. Keep going, keep knocking at the doors, keep getting feedback on your CV and showreel, and keep making it the best it can be, and don't give up.
It's key. Don't give up. And I think that's one of the things, that just because you don't get an interview doesn't mean your work's not good enough. You might just not be the right fit for that.
And I'd say don't take it personal.
Yeah.
You know, I know it's easier said than done, but you know, it's just at the end of the day, it's a job. It's a business. You know, you are selling your skills. So sometimes your skills don't match the project, not the right time. You need a little bit more experience or more practice, but you know, don't take it personal.
And believe me, it's cliche, but it's like you might apply to 100 jobs, not hear anything back, and then just as soon as you've landed a role, you get the kind of email, are you free, are you available? Sometimes it is just all about the kind of time factor, and things shift and move around, so it might not necessarily be any of those points.
Yeah,
either.
and I know the we're fully aware of how frustrating and annoying it is not getting a reply, because you know, if I was on the other side, I'd want a reply, but unfortunately there's just not enough hours in the day to reply to every single person, which is equally frustrating for us as it is for the applicants. So I think the best thing to do is just to try and contact people other ways, by email or LinkedIn, to try and get some feedback, or as I said before, go to animation festivals, which is the best way of getting feedback.
Yeah.
That's definitely, I think, the one, you know, the reason why the studios are there is because they want to see you. I mean, I know we've spoken about this before, but it kind of connects to this topic, where if you don't hear back, if you're, you know, not getting your foot in the door, you know, you might not get a response if you email the studio sometimes. You might not get one if you email leads or directors because they're busy. But if you see them at a festival, that's the time to ask. That's the time to see, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
How can I fix this? Where am I going wrong?
They've set time aside. Also, for me, when we've done this, it's really nice to do it all in the space of sort of an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, because you get some context as to especially what's happening at universities or or freelancers and stuff, and it just informs us about what's going on as well. And it's just so much easier to communicate with someone where those issues might be or what they do successfully. Definitely face to face is the.
But don't apply again with the same show. If you didn't get in the first time with that one,
because then you'll remember it and then you'll just go past.
I remember this show reel.
But then that's tricky because you don't know if you haven't got that job the first time just because there's someone else with slightly more experience who got it. So I think that's the tricky thing when applying for a job, is without any feedback, you don't know whether you should apply for it or not, because you don't know if it's you weren't good enough or if it's you weren't right or just because there was someone else who was slightly better than you or who lived slightly nearer.
I guess it definitely is about being in the right place at the right time and having the right content.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might have the right content, it's not the right time.
I mean, if you're having a reoccurring problem that you're not getting any response, definitely just go and show your stuff to someone, get some feedback, and then move on from there. But it can be so many different factors. You never know.
Cool. So we wanted to kind of ask people what people's tips were for increasing a chance of getting an interview. So here's what they said.
The best way to boost the chances to get a job interview is the most obvious way is have an awesome portfolio, and we'll be very keen to chat with you. But I think portfolio aside, ideally you want to find a unique way to present your work, your CV, your application. Find a way to stand out from everyone else, considering the volume of applications that Access and I'm sure many other studios get. Making sure you have a good online presence is necessary as well, because a recruitment team, as well as direct applications, go out and source a lot of great talent, as I've already said. So having that online presence is vital in order for us to be able to find the talent, find your awesome showreel, and make contact with you. Making sure that your contact details, your email address, your phone number is up to date and it's accurate, and that you check your junk mail and you make sure that when you've been applying or posted new content online, that you're actively keeping an eye on your emails in case you get that golden ticket in from a studio who says, we've just spotted your showreel, we really want to chat with you, and you miss an opportunity because you've missed an email that was sent a month ago.
When you're starting out in the industry, particularly, the competition is so high, and sometimes you can underestimate how hard it is to get into the industry, I think. But what I would say is the resilience, the keeping on applying, keep going, keep trying different studios, and your time will come. You will have that opportunity, and when you get given that opportunity, make sure you give it your all. So it's not just about being able to use all the skills you hoped you'd be able to use in your dream job, being an animator. You might have started as a runner and you might be doing jobs that you think, oh, this is a bit frustrating, it's not quite where I wanted to be. But actually, it's absolutely fundamental to do that to your best of your ability, to show that you're really keen, you're really willing, you've got the most fantastic attitude, and they are the people that will always fly. They're the people that stand out, that make you want to pick them up and take them along with you in your studio and give them the best possible opportunities. That's how we do that very much at Jellyfish. We're a studio of a medium-sized studio, and finding those people with that fundamental attitude that is so positive that they always put their hand up to help is absolutely fundamental to helping develop their career, but also building the best possible team we can.
So I guess it comes down to the showreel. If your showreel's not strong, there are no shortcuts.
No.
There are very little ways you can boost your chance, because that's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just keeping on top of it, because everything they said was sort of spot on, but also, not just your own emails, but keep on top of social media for studios you want to work at, because especially if you're a grad, And before when I landed my job at Blue Zoo, I didn't know what I was going to do. And you might not necessarily know, because a lot of animation courses or people's experience when they're kind of at that level is quite broad, and you might not necessarily know exactly what job profile you fit into, and something might come up that you'd be a good fit for. They spoke about being a runner. We don't have runners in the studio, but we do take on a lot of grads for entry-level jobs. And when we do look at applications for that, yes, the guys with the skill set and that are in their reels, of course, they get a better chance. But we do also look at a broader sense across sort of multiple skill sets and those. So there's no reason cater it for the job, obviously, but we understand that if you're a graduate and at a starting position, that we do look at a little bit more than that. So it's really sort of how active you are, I think.
Just make sure you need to be open.
Yeah.
You need to be open to whatever opportunity comes your way, as long as it's still within the realm of what you want to do.
Yeah.
Just be open, just because you want to say, I know this is kind of taking it a step further, but say, oh, you definitely only want to work in games. But then let's say you do get an opportunity to work on, commercials. Don't just reject that because you only want to do games, because any experience is good experience. And even if it's not within what you want to do, but you get to experience what it's like in the studio, again, that's also, so like they said, just, grab it, but, grab the bull by the horns.
Yeah. That's the
saying.
And I think what Sarah said about resilience is key, in terms of you boost your chances by applying for lots of jobs with relevance. So by tailoring your CV or show reel to that specific studio, but then just doing that as much as possible, then hopefully you'll land on the right timing and the right type of job for your skills.
Yeah.
But not feeling hopeless when you don't get replies, or it takes a couple of months to find a job, which was easier said than done. But I think that's one of the keys to boosting your chances, is by planting lots of those seeds out there, so people can find you and you get a higher chance of getting an interview. Yeah,
I think definitely one of the last things you want to do is make it difficult for people to find you.
Yeah.
Just being able to Google your name, at least, after seeing, because sometimes it's by no fault, no one's fault. Something might be wrong with the link, something might be. So I'll give you an opportunity, I'll Google your name, and if that doesn't turn up anything, then I wouldn't want to put any more effort trying to figure out what you do, where you are, just at least have something somewhere, whether it's a LinkedIn, Vimeo, ArtStation, whatever.
Yeah.
And just coming back to saying, don't give up the perseverance. It's if you're a grad and you're feeling a little bit down about it, just know that you can be senior, you can be experienced, and you'll still probably deal with the same thing, because like we said, these sort of schedules shift round, the demand changes, within the year, and you kind of never really know about.
And by nature, everyone's so passionate about their jobs.
Yeah.
Therefore, they're always going to want to be doing better, which means you're always going to feel like you're not quite good enough, which is the nature of the business. So you kind of have to get used to that.
I think
and understand it's part of being a creative.
I think if you ever get to the point where you feel you're good enough, just might as well quit. Because
I'd say I agree.
You're not gonna. That's it. You've reached your peak. You're not gonna improve. You're not gonna push yourself.
Yeah, and then you'll just start getting a little bit.
Don't get me wrong. Confidence is good, but there's a difference between confidence and then saying, "Oh, I'm definitely good."
Yeah, it's a fast moving area, isn't it? And
yeah.
As an industry, but also creatively, yeah.
Because the better you get, the better you are at seeing things, which means you'll be seeing work that's better than yours, and you constantly want to achieve and push yourself to keep getting better. I mean,
we talked about this more in the last podcast with Ben in terms of that balance of confidence versus arrogance, and it's a very important balance to get right. So if you haven't listened to that one, go and listen
check it out.
So we also wanted to find kind of do's and don'ts of recruiters' experience of what regular problems they see people have applied have put on their CVs.
I think one of the most common mistakes that we see is someone applying for a job that they're clearly not got the right level of experience for. The best examples are, we'll post a lead rigging role, and we will get a lot of new graduates applying for that, and it's quite clear job description and the requirements, i.e. they're breaking down elements for pitches, they're working with a supervisor to manage a project team. It's all these types of experience that's listed, and you get a new graduate applying for that. So yeah, I think ultimately there needs to be more awareness and thought given to the roles that people are actively applying for. If there's no rigging role or even a junior rigging role advertised on a company's website, then send a speculative application. I would say that's a better way to still get an application into a studio rather than applying for a lead or a supervisor or a senior position that's advertised, because it just jars with what your level of ability is, and it makes us question why you've applied for that in the first place. Send a speculative one instead.
I think common mistakes when you're applying for a job are things like when people are a bit sloppy, they might have spelling mistakes, or they haven't taken much care over how they've presented something. They've done something really generic that makes you feel like you've just sent this application to 54 companies and we're no different. You don't particularly want to work for us. But it's the basic things that see it when people seem rushed, they're a bit sloppy, they haven't taken the care. It's really evident in the way a CV is written, in the way where the person it's addressed to, the date, there might be their telephone number is incorrect, that kind of thing. So they're the most irritating mistakes. And actually in this industry, if you think that you can't even take that care over the presentation of your CV and your show reel, then it's a real turn off and a bit of a no-no. So just take the extra 5 minutes to review your CV, get someone else to have a look through it. And likewise with your show reel, get someone else to look at it, give some honest feedback about it and make it the best it can be.
I think that's such an invaluable piece of information and a tip to just get someone to look, your friend, your parents, anyone, it'll take them 5 minutes to look through, and then you can so easily have a glaringly obvious mistake that you're completely blind to because you've spent so long on it, and it's such a simple thing to do that can save you from being rejected from a job.
Yeah. Although one thing I think that we need to kind of maybe mention is so like when you're applying, I mean, we did mention this earlier, like when you're applying for something, to apply for something that you can kind of see that you are eligible for that role. So if you're a junior and they're looking for a supervisor, obviously that doesn't make sense. But again, I wouldn't say that you shouldn't try to push for things that might be a little bit outside of your sort of experience, because not every single requirement for the job is, quote unquote required. Some of it can be overlooked based on the right candidate.
I completely agree, but when you're about to apply for that, in your own mind, you should be able to answer the question. Fine, you don't have necessarily all those sort of tick boxes, but if you don't, how would you envisage doing this job? And you need to be able to explain yourself and why you're going to go for it.
Or how do you compensate and bring something else to the table?
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's a contradictory message there, isn't there, in terms of saying, go for it, embrace life, apply for jobs, but don't apply for too many.
Yeah, I think just use common sense, really.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything about programming and the role requires programming, don't apply for it.
And I'd say if you're kind of missing 1 or 2 years off the experience it requires, then go for it. But if they're saying like we need 10, 15 years experience and you're a graduate, you're wasting your time applying for that job because it's nowhere near what you need. So there's the reason they're asking for that experience is not for skill level, but it's for their soft skills of running a team, being able to communicate, as we've talked about in previous podcasts. They want that experience that you can only get from running a team for 10 years, and a young person who's new to the industry is simply not going to have those skills and experience to be able to run a team of 10 people.
Yeah, totally agree. Although there's one cheeky thing I used to do. Sometimes some studios wouldn't have speculative applications, so they'd have the role, and I'd understand, okay, so then they're definitely working on something. So I'd email and I'll say, listen, I know I'm not the right guy for this, but are you looking for animators? That's what I used to do. And sometimes they would say, actually not at the moment, but within a month or two we are, so we'll hold on to your details. And that has actually worked out for me.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice.
So it's not, you can still get in touch, because obviously that sparks something for you. But I would say, just use common sense again.
That's real savvy.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to mention as well about so double checking things. If you have a website and it's a simple thing as firstname.lastname.com, double check that it's actually still active when you send it out with your CV, because I've been in that situation before where I was actually invited for an interview. I had no other copy of my CV, and I sat down and my website has expired, and they looked at it and they're like
scrambling
and they said, well, sorry, there's not much.
The shortest interview in the
It
world.
was the shortest interview in the world.
Yeah. To follow on from that, this happens quite a lot. If you've got things on your showreel that you can't sort of publicly release and you've password protected it, so many times people forget to put the password in the cover letter, so there's no way for us to access it. And then no matter how great your cover letter is,
really go chasing.
we're not going to go and find your work. So yeah, just remember that as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Moving on to animation tests, which is something quite common when applying for jobs as animators. So we wanted to hear what the studio's takes are on that.
So I guess my advice in terms of responding on being asked to do a test is to find out how you can make that test work for you, even if you don't necessarily get an immediate job out of it. So for example, I would be inclined to find out if you can use that test piece for your showreel, i.e. are you going to be given a piece of company IP and company asset and rig and all that kind of stuff that you're only going to be able to use to then submit to that particular studio, and that piece of work's never going to see the light of day. If, however, that's not the case, then it's a no-brainer that you should, if you've got the time and the inclination to do the test and feel you're capable of doing the test, then why would you not do a test? Because then, worst case scenario, if you don't get the job, then you've got that nice new shot for your showreel. If you're not able to use that particular test as a new showreel piece, then I guess the kind of obvious things to find out is how long a test piece is going to be. Is it a couple of days? Is it a couple of weeks? When you're kind of getting into a couple of week territory, it feels like that's too long for a test. I would make sure that you find out how soon afterwards you would expect to be given a decision. I'd also ask how many others may be taking the test and how many roles people are actually being considered for, just to allow you to form a more contextualised opinion of whether you should do the test or not. Certainly for Axis, we look to engage with individuals that we ask to do a test, with them having the opportunity to use that test piece at a later date.
The reason for doing the test is to understand not only the skill level, but the creativity and the creative thought process that they obviously go through when completing that. So it's a really good sort of lower level indication of how that person works and their all-round understanding of the brief that would have been given to them. And again, that's kind of helps us make an alignment between that person and the particular position and the project as well. Some projects perhaps are more straightforward than others. So again, doing a test will allow us to understand a bit more how that person best fits for that role.
So I guess in an ideal world, you never need people to do tests, but in reality, sometimes you just don't know if people would be a good fit, and a test is the best and safest way of doing that if the applicants are willing and have got the time to do it.
I think I can only speak on like how I've experienced it from both ends. So probably like a couple of years back, I wanted to get into games, and because I never had games experience, I had to do a test. So that was, it makes sense. They want to see what my animation would look like, not just visually based on my showreel, but how does it actually hold up, I guess, within their technical requirements. And then from our end as well, like just as a TV animation director, I might see someone's showreel. I don't know how long that shot took. So I just want to kind of gauge how they would be able to handle an actual shot. So I'd say, okay, you've got 2 days to do this shot, and we're not looking to sort of, give them a impossible task. It's just to kind of see if they fit sort of the time constraints that we have. And I'm sure every studio has their own requirements for why they need to do a test. I think they did mention one thing important is you need to be wary as well. Just make sure that, you're not being taken advantage of. That's one thing. It's not as common obviously with like the big studios and the named studios, but you do see it happen online, being posted on university forums and studios, students asking them to do certain things.
We do hear some horror stories of where tests have actually ended up in the final project, final things, which is,
Yeah, that's very unethical, and I think you just need to keep your eyes open for that.
And I think you have to have a slight bit of confidence in saying, like Jill said, where if you can use it in your showreel. So sometimes they might give you a rig that is you can't use in your reel, but I think it's always worth trying. Look, can I use this rig? Because I'd like to be able to use this in my showreel.
Yeah.
So just there's no harm in asking.
I'd definitely say that when it comes to doing animation, it's less risky because you'll be able to tell if this is a shot that belongs in a show or a film. Whereas with design, I think it's quite risky because once you've given the design out, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, I think the only instance I've been involved in doing it was to try out a character modeler who had wonderful stuff, in their portfolio, but we needed to check if it might have been the right fit for us in terms of our workflow. And in that instance, it was sort of, and for some design work, it was just sort of you give a character bio or a design brief, and it's how well you can meet that. And in that case, again, if it's very close to the design of the project and it's under NDA, then no, you can't put it on your reel. But a lot of the time, we just ask for a demonstration. So yeah, you can definitely put that design or that model or whatever it is into your portfolio. So yeah, it might be to your advantage because at least then you're probably going to get some feedback as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite useful.
And I think the main thing is to understand and ask questions on the purpose of the test. So why are you being asked to do it? So you can approach it from that reasoning.
Yeah.
The final thing we wanted to talk about was LinkedIn. Some people use it, some people don't, or don't quite understand its relevance. So I really wanted to ask the studios and ask Jill and Sarah how they use it and what they find it useful for.
Well, I think all the recruitment team here use LinkedIn, and I believe our heads of departments also use LinkedIn as well to look for talent, and it's especially a good place to find passive talent, passive candidates. So as a studio, we have taken substantial steps forward in the last couple of years to have a much better business profile on there, and be releasing lots of content on a regular basis to actually engage with talent and artists in the industry who follow our pages, for example. And through that, then anyone that follows Access is getting up-to-date information on job vacancies, on studio news, and it kind of builds that level of engagement from a business perspective. From an artistic perspective, I think we use it in such a way that we are able to search statuses of everyone's profile. So much the same way that Facebook, you've got a status area in Facebook, then you can create a status area in LinkedIn, and you can change that status that says to available for work, looking for opportunities, and making those types of changes to your status within your profile is exactly the way that studios like us and all the other studios operate within LinkedIn to actually find talent.
From my perspective, in my role, what I do, I always accept people who want to connect via LinkedIn. Some people send short messages, which I appreciate, and I'll try and acknowledge. I can't respond obviously to all people applying or asking me specific recruitment questions. I'll try and send that through to the recruitment team, as we'll always do our very best to try and make sure some acknowledgement of anyone making contact with anyone at Jellyfish. But the best way is, connect with as many people you know in a company that you'd like to join. It gives you some insight into the company. So at Jellyfish, anyone who connects with me can see some posts that I might put up there. If they if they also join company LinkedIn pages or any other social media pages, again, it gives them some insight into what that company's like to work for, some of the projects that they're working on. So it's a good information sort of platform. Even if there's not a particular job at that particular time, it allows you to keep in contact with them and see what they're working on and whether it's something that you want to be part of.
I have a different experience to that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I agree with what they're saying, but I personally, ever since I was from the very first, I forgot what they called it, but from the first million who joined LinkedIn, so they give you this badge and they make a big deal out of it. I have never once received a single job application via LinkedIn. But what I will say is I personally find it to be like a digital business card platform where if I meet someone, I like to search for them. If I find them, I add them on LinkedIn. So in the past, I used to kind of, do that, relentlessly. Whenever I meet someone, blah, 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 lead, director, this and that, I look for them, add them on LinkedIn, just because even if nothing comes of it, it's just having them there, I guess, made me feel more connected to the industry. And then now it's in the reverse happening where I'm getting lots of students adding me, and it now connects me with what's going on with students, and I guess they get connected to the industry. For me, that's where I found it useful, getting news, finding out what's going on. But I personally haven't received or tried to apply either.
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
I guess in regards to that, what when I've recruited people before, they've applied via the website, and then you've looked on LinkedIn, and then you've used it to see all of their work and see who they know. So I think just because you didn't get a job directly through LinkedIn doesn't mean LinkedIn played no role in you getting a job.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
I agree. I think it is what you're saying. It is essentially an electronic business card, and it really, you don't have to sort of keep on top of it. It doesn't necessarily need to go anywhere, but it is that sort of online networking, isn't it? It is that hub that we said before. It links out to everything else, and definitely I think I usually just as a quick link check it as opposed to open up a PDF CV. So for that it's great. And for checking what's happening in studios and stuff, it's great too, because I know we always do a quick sort of shout out, don't we, on there, and also just it's the common link too, and it's always you hear that if you've got a contact, you can get your foot in the door, and it's true, because like I said before, I think we mentioned that it's a lot about sort of relationships and trust and this kind of thing. And if we know you've worked with someone before, we might contact that person and say, how are they, and would you think they'll be a good fit for our studio? So it's good for that kind of thing too. It's not always immediately noticeable that you've maybe gone via that channel, but it's useful.
It's just another way of getting yourself out there. Because I think it's so hard to meet people inside studios, because you can email, but everyone gets so many emails, you can't reply to every email you get. So having kind of LinkedIn allows that kind of passive kind of communication where we can kind of connect with each other, and then when they update their show reel, you can just see it. So you're just there in the background, so you're reminding people that you exist. And which is all those small things add up.
Even directly, actually, because when you just said about the emails, I have responded to quick chats on LinkedIn, because that's kind of how we communicate even within the studio. It's just much quicker. You do a few lines of, oh, hi, how are you? Are you available? It's really actually still quite much quicker than sort of going through a formal email sometimes, if you can.
And Jill mentioned embracing the status by saying, if you're available, put that in your status, because for a recruiter to see you're available, that's like you're going to jump on that straight away, rather than looking at people who might not be available.
I think I just want to add one last thing to that and say, remember that this is a professional platform, because the amount of times I sometimes see sort of Facebook-like status updates where people are like, whether they're ranting about something or
count the triangles in a picture.
Exactly. I mean, I get it. Some of these are clickbait and they tend to, get attention, but you don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
You know, just keep it professional.
Yeah.
And you know, remember, you've got Facebook for Facebook, and you've got LinkedIn for LinkedIn.
Yeah.
If you have Facebook.
I think Jill also mentioned afterwards. It's on LinkedIn. There's great. One of the great things about it is the groups you can join, where you can actually ask people to look at your reels and get critiques, and to post your website and get feedback, and that ties into what we were saying earlier about it's another way of just ensuring that what you've made is the best it can be, and if there are any small little tweaks you can make, people can help you with that on LinkedIn.
And to be honest, you know, we're not the most confident kind of people in our industry. Sometimes, you know, it's good to have face-to-face, but a lot of people find it a bit more comfortable to join a community online, and that's totally okay. And this sort of gives you a platform. Yeah, a
nice kind of door into that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's all the questions we had today. I just wanted to ask people what their biggest kind of takeaway from that is. What's the one tip you'd say?
I think the one tip I would give away would be, obviously showreel is king, so that's number one thing. Put all your effort into that, but then beyond that, I'd say just be professional, keep it simple, be honest, and you know, just make it easy for people to contact you. Don't over embellish and complicate it.
Yeah, Negar?
Completely agree with that. I think beyond that is keep on top of what's happening now, be current, check what other people are doing in their reels, what studios are doing, and apply it to your own show reel and your own work, and learn to critique your own stuff, you know. Be harsh on yourself, and but then don't take it personally, because everyone experiences it regardless of their position and their background in this industry. It's competitive, so don't be put off.
Excellent. Speaking of learning to critique your own work, AnimDojo, if you don't know, is we basically started it to learn how to critique your work on your own. So obviously this is part of the AnimDojo podcast, and AnimDojo was built from scratch as a way to practice your CG animation with tons of video tutorials, weekly live streams, workshops, rigs to download for just £15 a month. So there's the advert.
Yeah.
That flowed in really nicely.
But we want to continue this conversation. So if you go to the YouTube version of this podcast, there's the comments underneath. So if you agree or disagree, we want to hear your thoughts. Or if you just have any comments, we'd love to start a conversation there following on from this podcast. So the next podcast we've got is the do's and don'ts of interviews and how to prepare for an interview. So for that, we spoke to Framestore and Double Negative. So look out for that podcast coming next. But that's it. So really wanted to say thanks to Jill Wallace from Axis and Sarah Tanner from Jellyfish Pictures for allowing us to speak to them to contribute to the podcast. And of course to Negar as well from Blue Sea.
No worries, it's a pleasure. Thanks.
And that's it. So from me, Tom, thanks for listening.
Negar.
And there you go.
Thanks for listening. And happy animating. See you guys soon.